All right, this is going to be a heater shaker 24-inch overview, the print process, as well as we're going to be talking about the 24-inch maintenance. So let's begin. All right, so we're going to be starting the process here. And basically, whenever we're starting the process, we're starting it in manual mode. And so we're going to click here, fan on. As you can see, we have the substrate back here. And I'm going to be feeding the substrate into the printer. So let's see here. This is going to be the start of a print job. I'm going to get the substrate under here. I'm going to help guide it through. And all I did was turn on fan. And that's to suction this paper right here onto the vacuum cylinder. This is how you'll start every individual job you have, or even if it's a multi-job. You'll need some slack at the beginning before you do anything. Once you have the slack in manual mode, you could start the dusting process. The TPU powder that you have kind of sitting in here will start to dump right onto the substrate, and it's going to lower the substrate into the scale. So it's dumping the powder. I'm going to add more powder. Our powder is reusable. So here we go. Now that it's dumping the powder onto the substrate, I could stop it and I could gauge the situation. There is a powder measurer on this screen, and we want that to be at 100. So now I'm going to help guide the paper down. I'm going to situate it properly. Once it's situated properly up here, as well as on the scale, it'll read as 100. And then we're kind of set up for the rest of the job. So we're going to go ahead and hit automatic and turn on the heat. And now it gets a little bit loud, but essentially the process will start. And this is the beginning of a run. So now, the way this heater shaker works is there is a sensor on the front, and there is a scale within the heater shaker. Usually, you'll adjust the guards on the side of the heater shaker to make sure that it's hugging the paper, but it's not touching. And you can see that the substrate is being guided through the tunnel because it sees that it has slack and that the powder scale is at 100. So the process becomes automatic. Now this is the beginning of a job, and during more prints, it's going to go all the way back to the printer, which we'll get to when the time comes. So here we go. We're looking at the scale for the heater shaker. That's this piece down here that the paper's kind of cradling in there with the powder. And you can see that there's guards on the side of the heater shaker here. These are adjustable. And what happens is, in order to prevent the powder from falling off the scale, you want those guards, these right here, one on each side, to be hugging the paper, okay? But you only want it to be hugging it, not touching it. And so it'll prevent the powder from falling off at an accelerated rate, which will allow you to keep the process going hands-free for a while. So as you can see, this is the main control panel for the heater shaker, and we have many different settings here. But what you want to worry about on this screen right now is the powder. So as long as this powder is at 100% or 70+%, it will continue to run automatic. So this is why we adjusted those guards and made sure there's enough powder on the scale. We also have Paraset, which allows us to control the settings for the heater shaker. And we have I/O, which allows us to diagnose any issues if we were running into issues. We'll go over those eventually. But back to the screen here, you can see that I have everything on but Link on automatic mode. And so it becomes a fully automated process. So over here is a sensor on the front of the heater shaker, and this sensor needs to read the substrate coming out of the printer for it to engage its mechanisms and move in unison. So towards the end of a job, we want to make sure that the substrate is running through the fan system here. It's going to cool it down, and that way you're able to kind of roll it in a tight roll at the end. This is also going to go under the torque bar here. You can see there's a torque bar. Now, when the substrate is going under, it's in the printing process, and it's attached to the wheel. So let's go ahead and do that. It's underneath the torque bar. And now we're putting it right here on the roller. This is a take-up reel. Let me just tape it down. All right. Now it becomes a fully automated process. So when the printer starts printing, it's going to see that this is basically ready to go. It does the front sensor, it does the scale, and then it comes to the back and it starts the torque. So that way it takes the pressure off of the belt and you're fully automated. So now we're going towards the end of a job. Basically, we're going to be cutting the substrate, going into manual mode, and leaving everything on except for dusting. Now this is going to make this whole process go by itself. So you want to make sure that the substrate is cut, and then you're basically ready to go. So we're at the end of a job, we're in manual mode, and everything's working at full blast. Now in manual mode, this heating source does not go into dormancy. So what that means is it's going to stay at full heat. So you kind of got to get that substrate through there pretty quick or lower the temperature. So we take a look over here. It's going through, it has the powder, but it's no longer checking any sensors. And that's because, once again, we're in manual mode. This is the end of a job, and we're trying to get that substrate out of there. So it's going to continue on this path till everything's gone. And towards the end of the job, we're just going to turn everything off, power it down, and then talk about maintenance. So today, we're going to showcase the heater shaker maintenance. We start with opening up the machine, removing the side panel, and opening up the top. All right. Now there's 8 screws over here. All right. And we're going to be removing these in order to change the filter unit. So we remove the HOPA filter, and then there's a charcoal filter. You're going to remove that as well. Now these are consumables, which you will replace every 6 to 8 months.
So also is it up or down?
Make sure it's in the correct orientation when putting it within the machine. So it's always the charcoal filter down first and then the HOPA filter on top. We enter it back into the unit. So we're going to clean all the excess oil that's around this piece here. All right, and now after we changed the filter, we're going to be working in the bay here. And we want to make sure that we're getting all this glycerin, out of the way. So we like to wipe down all over the place, make sure it's clean. The glycerin will build up all around the sides, up here, behind the bulbs, around this area. And you want to make sure that you're wiping all of this down. Now this is weekly maintenance, getting in here, kind of cleaning up all that glycerin. It will build up. You'll kind of see it on here. And you want to get all in there, back here in the tray in the back, around the corners, everywhere on these sides. You just don't want to touch the bulbs. All right, so basically, another step for this is to turn on feed. All right, and we're going to put this in manual mode, and it's going to start rolling the wheel. And you're going to take sandpaper here, and you're going to make sure that there's no buildup of glycerin on this vacuum roller. So you'll do this a few times. You'll wait for it to roll around, and then you'll continue doing this. Now this is some basic maintenance that you do. This is daily maintenance. All right, we turn off feed, and then we kind of just make sure that the powder's off of the control panel, around the areas that you don't need the powder in, maybe over here. Just keep, the area nice and clean. close this up. Make sure everything's nice and clean, because that powder does get kind of everywhere. And so it's oil, powder, and the vacuum cylinder that we're mainly paying attention to here for the daily maintenance and weekly maintenance.